What's going on, Imperials? It's Emperor Cubone here. Everybody knows the Pokemon types, and you can probably rattle off at least a dozen different matchups off the top of your head. But ever since Gen 2 added some types to the game for balancing, people have latched on to the idea of adding more types into the Pokemon world, whether they need to be balanced or not. Occasionally there are some good ideas here, but most of the time it seems like people just want new types for the sake of it and give bad suggestions. The worst of all to me is the light type. Now, I will say that I saw some pretty convincing theories on the light type, back with the announcement trailer of X and Y. Of course, that then turned out to be the fairy type, so they're not going to make a type that's so similar. Some people point to candidates like Ampharos or Volbeat as needing the light type, but that's a little too literal to be the counter to the dark type. In Pokemon, dark doesn't mean the absence of light, it means evil, so I've never understood why people need the light type so badly. That's one camp of it. There are others who want it as some kind of light magic, but that's just the fairy type as well. Fairies are not always good, I understand this, but in most stories they are generally considered to be, and even if not, they do always have some sort of mystical powers. So in that vein, I've also seen different things crop up, like the magic type, or the arcane type, or mana type, or whatever you want to call it. But again, fairy pretty well covers the magical elements, and anything that's left over is squarely under the psychic umbrella. So definitely none of these are needed, but really most of them are still under some kind of subset of the light type, because it's not actual rays of light. If you need more convincing, what kind of Pokemon would you make into a magical light type? Togekiss? Gardevoir? Floette? Yeah, they're all fairy types anyway, and I think that fairy was the right call for Pokemon, as it can fit across various creatures in a way that physical light could never do. But that is far from the only suggestion out there. For some reason, I have seen the wind type pushed a lot, or sky type, or whatever you want to call it, but once again, this is supremely redundant because we already have the flying type. I get that flying is a verb rather than an adjective, but this type is filled with aerial creatures that populate the skies of this world. I know that the idea of this new type is to actually be wind-based, but how many Pokemon could you actually make out of wind? And if you look at the attacks, flying already has wind-based moves. Air Slash, Air Cutter, Hurricane. Flying-type Pokemon are already airbenders, guys. We don't have to make another type that would function exactly the same with all of the equal strengths and weaknesses. But speaking of redundant, I've also seen the wood type being brought up. I don't know why anyone could possibly think that it's not already covered by the grass type. I mean, we got Trevenant, if nothing else, but come on guys, a Pokemon's exterior surface composition isn't the most important thing about it. Although, that being said, I've also seen other substance types proposed, like the plastic type or the rubber type. It's funny, it usually seems to be just one or the other, never both, but it's around these ideas that I start to think people aren't really understanding what Pokemon types are for, because material-based types like these are not nearly common enough to support a pool deserving of their existence. How many Pokemon could even be considered plastic? Porygon, I guess, maybe? Some ghost-possessed objects, but they would all have to be exclusively man-made. As for rubber, you've got maybe Jigglypuff and Swalot probably, but that's about it. I don't think Donphan would count, so these ones will never really take off. However, one that I do think is kind of similar that makes slightly more sense is the Crystal type. Now, I still don't think it will happen, but I could see it over the others. The problem is that we've already got the Rock type, which houses Diancie and other Pokemon that could be considered Crystal. The only possible exception being Sableye, really, but the only reason this could even be the case at all is because they have done a poor job of conveying the idea that crystals are in fact welcome within the rock typing. So I would say instead of just a new typing, all we really need is a few more crystalline creatures within the rock type to solidify it. But while we're talking about our sedimentary friends, I would like to go ahead and eliminate the fossil type from the record, because I have seen this one a lot too, but it's also just the rock type, guys. Sure, we have a lot of fossils over the years, but enough for its own type? Who else could even use this type? Relicanth, I guess, but is it supposed to be a dinosaur type for Aggron, or is it just a prehistoric type for Mamoswine? I just don't see a good reason to form a specific cutout for these Pokemon because it's far too narrow when the rock type will do just as well for this category. But to that point, we've got to address the Cosmic type. This is somehow one of the most prominent types to be proposed, but assuming this is in fact referring to Pokemon from space, that seems to be an even smaller pool of pre-existing Pokemon to pull from than the fossils. Unless you count the Ultra Beasts, I guess, but it just doesn't work. The world of Pokemon is singular, and if you start defining everything not found on that planet as Cosmic type, then when you open up the rest of the universes out there, that means that 98% of all Pokemon would be Cosmic. Plainly put, there's nothing inherent to the entirety of space that would make Pokemon a single type. Just like the world we see usually has a wide variety of types, and there's no Earth type to unite them all. Although, that being said, if there were an Earth type, it would probably just be the combination of ground and rock, since they do overlap quite a bit. Another of the most common suggestions that you'll usually find is something like the Tech type, or sometimes called Cyber. It is an interesting premise, to be sure, but once again, this would require every single Pokemon in this category to be man-made. By definition, technology is not something found in nature and could never be on a naturally occurring Pokemon. Unless it was some kind of legendary and you said that they're the ones that gave humans technology, but that's a whole other thing. Furthermore, to me, this would have a tough time distinguishing itself from either steel or electric. I mean, what kinds of moves could you even do with this that wouldn't already be covered by those other types? Maybe like a plasma cannon or something to that effect, but on that subject, I have actually seen plasma suggested as its own type of Pokemon, and that one has a little more bearing than most, I would say, but as cool as such Pokemon might be, you would have a hard time setting it apart from the fire type to the layperson out there. I also recently just saw the Aura type suggested, but I don't see how Lucario needs its own type, because I don't really see how many other Pokemon would fit into it. I also don't think the Blood type, or really anything physically, organically based, would be included, especially in a game for kids. The Fighting type is probably the closest that you're gonna get. But I did want to mention a pretty popular one that I had not seen a lot before, but came up after Pokémon Uranium, a fairly widespread fan game, that gave us the Nuclear type. Now, a common hurdle for many of these suggestions is the lack of fleshing out what they would be super effective or weak to, which doesn't exactly help justify their existence against all of the other types. However, since Nuclear was actually in a game, we got to see it be super effective against all of the other types besides Steel, but also weak to every type. So it was extremely volatile, which is perhaps the point. But first of all, if something is a biohazard, I have a hard time seeing why it wouldn't just be part poison type. But more importantly, I don't see the need of including the, again, largely man-made influence of Nuclear, especially when it does the opposite of balancing every other type. However, in a similar vein, I do think that we should talk about the Shadow type. This would be the best counterpart to the proposed Light type, but the difference is this one has actually been in an official Pokemon game before. Kind of. Shadow Pokemon were included in both Colosseum and Gale of Darkness. However, it wasn't exactly a full-blown type. More like a characteristic that would overcome certain Pokemon. Sure, Shadow moves were also super effective against all of the other types out there, but once you got a Shadow Pokemon, you couldn't really even level it up, or evolve it, or trade it, or anything, really. But the GameCube wasn't even the only time this was seen, with it coming back in Pokken Tournament, and even in Pokemon Go. So it's clearly something that the people behind the scenes seem interested in. But if we do ever see Shadow Pokemon become prominent in the main series, it probably won't be as an actual type, but rather go on top of other Pokemon, and just make a still water and ground type Wooper evil or feral or whatever you want to call it. Besides, as far as actual Shadow characteristics, we do already have the Ghost type for a reason. However, there is one more type that I have failed to mention thus far, one that is even more common than the light type itself, that of course being sound. And I've not mentioned it because out of any suggestions out there, I do think this one has the best chance of actually becoming a real type one day. There's already many videos out there discussing how to implement it, and I may even do it myself one day, but good job guys, that's one. You got one plausible suggestion out of the dozens of them over the years. Maybe we should all revisit what makes the original Pokemon types work, because other than the sound type, they're usually repeated elsewhere and are far too redundant. But what are your favorite Pokemon type suggestions that will never happen? That triple question mark type, probably? Let me know down in the comments. Also be sure to leave a like, share this video, and subscribe so that you too can become an Imperial today. And we'll see you around next time!